Hey everybody, welcome back to Film School. Today I'm sitting down with Leatherface himself, Mark Burnham. Mark Burnham played Leatherface in the 2022 version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that debuted on Netflix, directed by David Blue Garcia, and produced by the one and only Fede Alvarez, who's created movies like Evil Dead and the upcoming Alien movie. And I'm a huge fan of the 2022 Texas Chainsaw film. I love all the movies in the Texas Chainsaw franchise for one reason or another. But this one, even on rewatch, has really held up for me, from the unrelenting carnage to really capturing the themes that made Tobe Hooper's movie so special. This movie really succeeds for me, and Mark Burnham is no small part in that. Playing Leatherface and filling the gigantic shoes of actors that have gone before, he really held his own and created a version of Leatherface that is really scary and also really sympathetic and just an incredible portrayal of the character. I really enjoyed this conversation. We also talk a little bit about Mark Burnham's other films like LOWLIFE and Wrong Cops, which I think is one of the funniest movies to come out in the past couple of decades, and so much more. You guys are really going to love this conversation with the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Burnham. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Mark, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to be able to talk to you. And I know there's so much to discuss in terms of Leatherface, but I want to go back. I would be kicking myself later if I didn't go back to the 1990s and talk about your stint on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So take me back to walking onto set, the third season of a show that is in really the height of its popularity. Like, what was that like as an actor early on in your career?
Well, first of all, they hired me because I could speak and take a punch. So that part was written as a vampire that speaks, which they didn't have a lot of at that time, I don't think. And then it was a fight scene, Spike is going to kill me. So that's why I won the role, because I was doing a lot of active fight scenes and stuff like that at that time. And in terms of walking on the set, I mean, it was a pretty amazing ordeal. There was quite an extensive fittings process before the days of work, where they fit me with the contacts and the teeth and the prosthetics very generally, and then the wardrobe, of course. And then on the day of, it was 4 hours into the makeup, just to get to the point where I was ready for the camera.
I know I listened to another interview and you were talking about your initial experience with LA was coming and visiting a family member, I believe, who was in the stunt community. And you decided pretty quickly, like, I don't want to jump off buildings. But
Right.
It sounds like a lot of your early career, and definitely with Leatherface, there's been like very involved action moments throughout, going back as far as the 90s. So was there always like an interest in doing physical stuff and doing some stunts that didn't involve heights and, maybe lighting yourself on fire? Or was it?
I mean, just the nature of my size, put me in that category where I was never going to be the guy who kisses the girl unless I kidnap her first. So my auditions, I was always, with the big guys, with the stunt guys, not necessarily with the stunt guys, but with the bigger, imposing people, and always bad guys. So I think out of that, it just became a natural part of the progression of jobs that I would be involved in fights to some degree. And I, just kind of picked it up and learned how to do it. That guy, my family member, was my stepbrother. He was involved with the big boys. Like he went to Bob Eubanks Stunts School, which was active for a while in the 80s. And that was Corey Eubanks and his sister, jumping cars over ravines and stuff like that. So that was and when I visited him, that was just after that, when he was, kicking around town and doing stunt jobs. So it was pretty obvious that wasn't going to be what I was going to do. You know what I mean? And if you look at Corey Eubanks' He runs a car crash clinic now in Texas. And I think he travels around too. But it's very involved. You know what I mean? Like he's got his own training rigs that are like, set up on a framework and they roll and crash down and just to give a person the sense of going upside down and turning over. And it's really the real deal in terms of safety and stunt work and that kind of stuff. And that was way more involved than I was ever going to get, So I think it's just a natural progression of the type of jobs that I was getting was more kind of confrontational fight scenes. That's about
Right.
it.
Yeah, at 6'4", it's either NBA or movie villain. It's like one of the two.
Yeah. It was never going to be the NBA, I'll tell you that.
Did you enjoy the physicality? Because like obviously you're reading for it and you're going, hey, I get to be in makeup and I get the costume and I get to go on set and I get to say my lines. Was it always like, okay, now's the fight scene part, or was it like, oh, I get to get my hands dirty and I don't just have to do dialogue. I get to do a little bit of both.
I always enjoyed the two just were one thing to me. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I play those kind of parts that get physical. And so, the other thing is the nature of coming up in Hollywood, there's a long period where you're never going to have a stunt double. You know what I mean? Like, if it's a small film or relatively cheap TV show, they're not going to double you. You're going to have to do it yourself. And to make it, look good and be dynamic and exciting, you just got to learn to do it. And I relish doing it. I felt a sense of pride and confidence in doing it, and I felt like I did it well, So, yeah, I like doing it. I like fighting a lot. In the entertainment industry, I don't fight, in the street.
Good disclaimer, and definitely good to know, considering you're a chainsaw-wielding man in your latest film. So I'm curious, like, going into it, obviously there's a sense of professionalism and I'm going to figure this out. And I've heard that through other interviews I've listened to you on where, you're very confident in a lot of these skills that you've developed over your career. But like you said early on, you're not necessarily getting handed, here's a huge stunt team that's going to help you through this, or here's your, acting consultant that's going to guide you through this moment. Like going into some of those early sets, whether it's like a Third Rock from the Sun doing comedy, or whether it's doing some more action on a Buffy, like, did you go in with a sense of fear of, am I even heading the right direction? Or was it something where you're picking up the phone and calling people going, hey, can I get your advice? You've been here and done that. Like, did you just feel kind of like, I got to figure this out one way or another. Let's hope the director likes what I'm doing.
I'll tell you, man, I was definitely thrown into the deep end of the pool, with no experience like that. So I'm not going to say names or titles, but my first TV job was a procedural, which is, I don't know if you or your audience are familiar, but procedurals are the cop shows, CSI, Miami, blah, 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 whatever. They're the police procedures. That's where the name comes from. So anyway, my first job was a procedural, and it was an interrogation scene. And I am sitting around all of the male regulars on the show. And they were all, very recognizable people. And I'm just going to be honest with you and tell you that my first few jobs, including the ones that you mentioned, Third Rock and this one, just being honest, like, I was just hoping not to get fired. And I'll explain how that works on Third Rock in a minute. But this one was before that. And so I'm sitting around the table, not familiar with the shooting procedure on a TV show or anything really. I got a knock on my door. They want you on set. I followed some dude to the place. He told me where to sit. Like 10 seconds later, the director steps up and says, okay, and he's calling out names of the crew, like, whatever, Frenchie, you're going to come in from this way, and then we're going to switch over to Herb over there, and blah, blah, blah. And then he looks at me and he's like, just why don't you guys run the lines or something? And then he walks off. We run the lines. He steps back in real quickly and goes, all right, that's going to be great. You guys got this, right? And meaning the crew, meaning what that means is they're not going to take 40 minutes to light it. They're ready to go right now. So he steps away, and it was, more than a couple minutes while we're sitting there. And every single regular on the show that's sitting around the table that I'm at proceeds to coach me exactly opposite of what the director just said. And then the second guy coaches me opposite of what the first guy said. And then the third guy coaches me opposite of what both of them say. And, I was trained by A-list actors in the theater. I worked for a bunch of movie stars who owned a theater. And so I knew generally what the protocol is and what, kind of etiquette is. And I knew enough to know that you're not supposed to be telling me what to do. You know what I mean? Like, it's not cool for another actor to tell somebody else how to do something or what to do or anything like that. And so that I'm sitting there and I'm just fuming. I'm so pissed off that I didn't even really know what to do. But it was a great lesson, because what I finally came to in that few minutes before they yelled action is I realized that I got to do what I think is right. And what I do has to be the right thing for my character. And, fuck all these other guys. You know what I mean? Basically. Because I was seriously pissed off. I was like, dude, I'm already just hoping not to get fired. And now you're going to confuse me like this on purpose as some sort of, I don't know, hazing or just stupidity move. Like, I was pissed off. But it really served me after that, knowing that I'm responsible for my character, and the communication comes from the powers that be, meaning above the line, director, producer, to me, and I decide. And that doesn't really involve anyone else, as long as you have the kind of caveat that I know what's proper for my character. So I learned that early on. And then in terms of Third Rock, like, I had never done a sitcom at that time. Luckily, I was in the cold opening, so I didn't have, 30 minutes of dialogue to do or whatever. But the taping process on a sitcom is, their turnaround is basically 1 week. So you show up on Monday or Tuesday and you camera block, and then you camera block Wednesday and Thursday, and then you shoot on Friday in front of the audience. And so, my character had 4 lines on Monday or Tuesday when we started, and they took a line away each day during camera blocking. So by Friday rolling around, I had 1 line left. And I kind of knew that if I lost that line, I was going to be sent home. Now, on those kind of jobs, it's not like getting fired. It is getting fired, but it's not like getting fired in that you're still going to get the money. You just don't get to shoot. And ultimately, what I learned about that is that TV sitcoms is be funny now. Everybody is dictated by be funny now, because if you're not, it's going to get taken away or changed or written out or whatever. And when they call the cast to the rail, that's what's going to happen. The producers, the writers' room, which we hear so much about, right? Those guys are running the show with one person in the lead, but primarily when they say during camera blocking, cast to the rail, you're going to walk to the rail of where the audience sits. The producers sit up in the seats, and they're going to give you notes down to you're on the floor of the studio. And in my limited experience, it's be funny now. Because if you're not, it's going to get changed and written out and whatnot. Now, I don't have it, pretty quickly on, like I didn't do that many sitcoms. I think maybe 3 or 4, 2 of which were, pilots and never saw the light of day. So, you know, I didn't have much opportunity to hone that skill, let's say. Now, I'm a pretty funny guy, and I primarily before, you may or may not realize this or know this, but primarily before Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'm known for comedic villains. You know what I mean? So I have a good sense of what's funny and what's not, but I'm not so quick on the uptake as that sitcom. So I didn't really have an opportunity to hone that ability just to turn it on and do it right now.
Right. I was curious about that because I know the 90s was a lot of TV, and then from the 2000s on, a lot of, film roles, and, and I think of Wrong Cops, which I think is one of the funniest. I think it's one of the funniest movies that's come out in a really long time.
Thank you.
And you've had these rich collaborations with directors who have very unique styles. I mean, in the case of Wrong Cops specifically, very, very unique, bizarre styles. Or even looking at something like LOWLIFE, where you've got a, up and coming director that's like getting a ton of attention, getting a Tarantino to a premiere. Like, you've got these really cool collaborations on a film set. And it seems to me like, hearing you talk and just listening to others talk about it, it seems like the TV world is very much a messy world of, after a couple seasons, it is messy as to who's really got say-so creatively. You've got the cast getting more power, more popularity, the showrunners kind of running it, but the writers writing it. It seems like on a movie set, the experience is a lot more symbiotic between director, actor, like we can really make something special instead of, hey, I'm coming in this week. Let's awkwardly step into this workplace. Like, which of those do you prefer? Do you like coming in, showing up to an established world, or starting from the ground up, working one-on-one with a director and a writer to like bring a character to life?
Well, it's definitely more high pressure with a TV type situation. You know what I mean? And that's never good, in my opinion. Like in terms of audition, I thrive on that pressure of that moment, kind of low. It's not low level risk, but I mean, it's different than the high pressure of a TV situation where, they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and all that pressure. I don't thrive so much under that kind of pressure. Like on a film set, I can have the time to prep my relationship with the director and reach a good collaborative working kind of repertoire or kind of rapport with them, and I much prefer that for sure. I did want to say one other thing about the 90s, and that is that I because of how I happened into acting and that whole learning process, I pretty much knew that my journey in Hollywood wasn't going to be quick stardom. You know what I mean? So, I worked my way up from day player, and I was never an actor to sit and wait in my trailer for the knock. I would always drop my gear, hit the craft table for some refreshment or something, and then go stand in the back and watch everyone that was going on. And I did that on every job. So eventually I learned what all the departments are doing. And then eventually for me, it was gathering enough balls to be able to reach out to those appropriate people and say, hey, was that good for you? Was that good for you? What do you think? Not trying to circumvent the director, but just trying to find out what that person's job was and how could I make that job easier or better for me. And I had kind of arrived at that plan because of what I said a minute ago about the being the flash success. I knew it wasn't going to be that. So then where does that leave an actor? The only place that leaves an actor is to build his reputation on based on work and either end product or working on the set. And I wanted to make those as knowledgeable and as deep as I could be educated so that the product was as good as it could be.
Yeah, that's huge. I interviewed director Joe Lynch. He was talking about just the importance of being a good person on set, like,
Yeah.
and people undervalue that. They are really pride themselves on their craft, but he's like, the people that get brought along from job to job are just good people that, like, hey, they're not a jerk. Like, they're going to get the work done. We can bring him from one to another. And I'm curious, you collaborated with Quinton on Wrong Cops and like all of these other films, I think 4 total with him. Like, was that a case of just like, hey, at this point we're friends, we're going into one after another working on these? Was there something there that was like, just, we're seeing this the same way? Cause like, it's such an interesting period in your filmography of like one after another in this very interesting kind of auteur director's world, creating these kind of interesting narratives. Like, what was that period like?
Well, it requires a bit of backstory. So at the time, I wasn't represented, and I wasn't getting a normal. When you're not represented as an actor, you have far fewer auditions. So then I noticed that I wasn't getting my normal, relative high percentage of callbacks. So I figured I should do a casting director workshop and try to check myself and make sure that my work is, what I think it is. And I did that. And during that period, I just happened to pick the right 6-week chunk of time for this casting director that she was casting a film called Wrong by Quentin Dupieux, starring Jack Plotnick and Steve Little. And I was watching the breakdowns daily at that time, so I saw the breakdown go out for the largest part, and I submitted for that, and she called me in for the smallest part. But I was thrilled to have it, and it was a cop. So, and I still ride, but in those days I was only riding a Harley, so I showed up in my leather jacket, and I just, auditioned as an asshole cop, similar to an airport cop that I had a run-in with in the 90s. Those airport cops, man, they don't...
different breed there.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, and then so I mean, you know the way it works. Like, if I were to get a callback, it would involve another meeting and maybe a meeting with the director, and then I would find out if I got the role then. But none of that happened. He saw that tape and he hired me on the spot to the casting director, no further meetings. And he then proceeded to write an additional day for the part because it was only a 1-day role. So he wrote me another day just because he loved my audition tape so much. And then I think when we were on the set, 2 things happened. First of all, we got along really well. It was relatively easy. Quinton does everything. And when I mean everything, I mean he moves the camera. He's he's the DP. He's the, everything. And so it's a very quick day. And I think I fell into that really easily, that process for him. Whereas, some other people on other films that he had done, such as Rubber or whatnot, maybe didn't fall into that rhythm so easily. And then the other thing that happened, this is like so specific and weird. So I played a cop in Wrong, and in this one scene, I'm supposed to stop the car of the main character from going forward on this road because, and it's 100 yards. It's like 100 yards behind me is a car that's on fire. And so we do that portion of the scene, and it's good and cool, and we do it a couple times. And then Quentin's like, all right, this time I want you to turn and walk back to the car. And I'm like, the whole way? And he says, yes, walk the whole way. So I do it, and it takes like 5 minutes, you know what I mean, to get there. And while I was doing that, I had, an actor's always trying to figure out, why am I doing this? So I was like, okay, why am I doing this now? And I arrived at a little conversation I was going to have with the tow truck driver. So I did that. And then Quinton called he called cut on the rehearsal, and then he joined us back at the tow truck driver. And he's like, okay, run the scene. Like, he was like, why were you talking to him? And I said, I was talking to him because why am I walking all this way? Like, I had to have some reason. And he's like, okay, so run that. Let me see what you did. And what I had done is, and the tow truck driver was not an actor. He was a tow truck driver who barely spoke English. And what I said to him was, if you find me a Lexus, I'll pay you for it. And I had this kind of conspiratorial conversation with the guy about stealing me a car. And that was not written into the script, but the character was an asshole. You know what I mean? So I kind of extrapolated that. But that right there, him calling that rehearsal and then turning around and going to the tow truck driver, that is where Wrong Cops was born. And it just happened to end up that Manson had reached out to him like, hey, I love rubber, I want to do something. And so he put the two together and made up Wrong Cops, where I play the same character from Wrong in a whole movie written for me, which, I mean, I have this crazy Hollywood luck at times. I don't know where it comes from, but at an inappropriate age, these things happen for me. And that was one of them, like I was in my mid 40s at that point, and nobody writes you a movie for my kind of, and with whatever, a rock star and other, name actors, really. I mean, they may not be, super named, but Eric Wareheim and Manson and Steve Little. I mean, these are guys that had established careers.
Right. Eric Roberts, Ray Wise. I mean, there's crazy breakdown of people.
Yeah.
It's interesting looking at your filmography, and I think it would be really funny for someone who's not familiar with you pre-Leatherface to go back and watch just the opening scene of Wrong Cops, because it's such a radically different character. But even in the comedy you've done, like, and I would say LOWLIFE is riddled with comedy, there's always this dark undertone, or sometimes I would say even like a horror adjacent kind of angle to it. And I know you mentioned earlier, like, when you're 6'4" imposing dude, that you're going to get into those types of roles in films. I have to ask you, like, do you like the dark side of things, the horror side of things? Are you a horror fan? Because, like, going into, say, a Leatherface, like, was that like, oh, dream come true? Or was it like, okay, let me dig in and watch these movies for the first time? Like, how were you approaching that subject matter?
Well, I didn't watch them for the first time, but I did take a deep dive into them. And that is a whole nother question, which I don't know if you're ready for or not. But yes, the answer to this question is yes, I definitely, the dark side of things speaks to me. And I mean, this is a little out of context based on your question, but definitely the reason that I took LOWLIFE, that I wanted to play that part, is because in the press at that time, there were kind of like, not full-blown stories about it, but definitely hinting that the cartels were harvesting organs, and that there was some element of that going on. And I I love to put a face to what people uh, are doing in the world for for just, I don't know, that's my gift to the community, I guess, just to be that person who is reprehensible and put that face on them in an artistic way, so that it becomes a little more real to people that somewhere out there right now someone is trafficking in humans and harvesting their organs. I mean, that's why I took that. So that's answer specific to Low Life, because that's the one of the most real characters I played. Um, but I do relish in the there's a quote on my website, and it's my quote, and I love it. And it's, I relish the art and craft of creating memorable characters that affect people in meaningful, lasting ways. So I want to make an impression, and I make my impression by being the worst possible example of humanity that I can be. And I, whatever, I have a knack at it. Monet does flowers and lilies, and I do, reprehensible people, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice of words to say, putting a face to it, given the role. Going into Texas Chainsaw, like, how did that come about? Was it something where, and again, I just context for myself, I'm a huge horror fan. I love the genre. And one of the things that I'm always curious about going into films like Texas Chainsaw sequels or Friday the 13th sequels or Halloween is there's some producers and directors that seem to approach it from, let's get a big dude, and it could be a stuntman, it could be anybody. We'll just throw a mask on. If they're wearing a mask, it doesn't matter. Like, all they have to do is walk around and kill people. And then there's other people, which, Fede Alvarez and, the team behind Texas Chainsaw, they went back to what I think is compelling about the first film, which is there's a lot of humanity there. And there's this sense of, there's a whole theme of like, are not recognizing the town we're in anymore, and outsiders coming in, and family, and all these things that beneath the blood and the terror, there's these rich themes. It seems like when they put out the casting call for this, I would assume they weren't just looking for, hey, Gunnar Hansen 6'4", let's get someone 6'4". Like, what was the casting approach like? And I have to imagine the list isn't humongous, but also I'm assuming everybody that fits the type would be wanting to do this. So how did you kind of get involved in this?
Well, a little backstory, as you probably know, unfortunately in our industry in 2015 or 2016, the in-person audition went away.
No.
So I got this audition in February, mid-February of 2020, and it came into me like any other self-tape audition. And by the way, a little side note of additional backstory, between the shift to self-tape auditions and 2020, do you know how many callbacks I had for my self-tape auditions? 0. And I had a very good casting reputation prior to that, being called in directly to producers. I mean, I probably had 30, 40 meetings on Malcolm in the Middle, 30, 40 meetings for David E. Kelly. I mean, it was a good established reputation. And then to have that and my ability to win over the room just be taken away was a big problem for me. But anyway, so 2020 happens. It comes into me like any other self-tape audition, and it's kind of hidden, right? So they didn't tell me what it was. It was just a scene where a seemingly special needs person got thrown into a police van with his mother, and that was the scene.
Wow, okay.
So I did it, and they responded to it. And they got back to me within a couple days, and they said, okay, do this scene now. Anyway, I went 4 tapes deep into that process before they were like, all right, the directors want to meet you. So I went to the Roosevelt Hotel on a Sunday morning in late February, and I met the director. And that was the first time that I was told that it was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that it was legendary, and it was going to be a direct sequel. And we had that conversation. And his words to me were, are you ready for that? Because it's going to change my life. And I said, first of all, I've been trying to run around this town and get this job for 20 years. So, of course, I'm ready for it. I believe that it also was made apparent to me, and I can't remember when exactly it was made apparent to me, but, well, it had to be after I won the role. So that meeting with the directors, at the end, as they always do, is like, well, we're seeing other people, so you don't know if you have it at that point. And then they come back a couple of days later and they say, okay, you got to test with the directors. And at that meeting in Fady's office, with just him, a store-bought mask, a cameraman, and an apron, it was made clear to me what they wanted. And what they wanted was for me, if I were to win the role, I would be asked and required to match Gunnar Hansen as if he was doing the role in 2020. And so if you kind of think about that or fuzzy up your logic a little bit, I'm being asked to play an actor playing a character. So it's kind of a dual portrayal, really, is what it is.
Yeah.
And I love a filmmaking challenge. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because of that thing that I told you about in the 90s about finding out about everybody's job, I feel like I have a pretty deep understanding of what how a filmmaking process is.
Yeah.
And so anything that challenges that is going to pique my interest, and I dove into that head first. I said, of course I'm ready for it. I don't have any problem doing it. I think you're going to be happy with what I put together.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's not just talking out my ass. I don't mean to be an arrogant prick or whatever, but the people that trained me, if I could name them, you would understand.
Yeah.
They're all A-list actors, nominated for Oscars, nominated for Tonys, Pulitzer Prize winning writers. And I got out of school in 92, and I didn't get an acting job until 97. So I spent 5 years with these people. I mean, that it's not all that time because that theater imploded at some point in that time period, but at least 4 years with them studying on a weekend. Every Saturday we ran a workshop, a very famous workshop in LA called the Met Theater Workshop. And I was a founding member of that. So those are the people that trained me. So, when I say stuff like that, I don't have any, doubt that you're going to like what I put together. It's like, it's because the people who trained me to put shit together, like, they rode me hard, put me away wet, and I learned and paid attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what I'm doing, and I kind of like, I'm pretty confident in that. Anyway, whatever. So I'm hired to play Gunnar as if he was doing this role in this movie in 2020. But again, let's dissect that. So I don't have Gunnar.
Yeah.
I can't talk to him.
He passed away, 5 years before that? 6 years? I want to say it was
I'm not sure. It wasn't too long ago, but it was, I want to say maybe 2007, 8.
But no way to talk to him and say, hey, what would you do with the character? I mean, you're starting with just assuming just footage from the film, maybe some behind the scenes stuff.
And also the knowledge that my film is a direct sequel.
Yeah.
So, and the definition of that in this context is you have the first 1974 original, and then nothing matters but
Right.
my film. So, and just for a little context, I watched the second one, but that was not really helpful to me. Um, so I watched the 74 film, pretty exhaustively to get his movement patterns down and the way he would do things. And then any interviews I could find, I watched those. And that's all I got. Everything else has to be my imagination extrapolating how he would do it in this scenario.
Was there any specific things that you noticed? Because like you're watching it like game day footage, like you're looking at every movement, and I think some of the remakes and sequels have him just be like a machine, but there's a lot in the first one of timidity and fear on his part, and who are these people, and my dad is insane, and like all these pieces. Like, was there anything you saw Gunnar do where you thought like, okay, he moves this way in these moments, or things where you're like these 2 or 3 things are Leatherface. Like these are the things I want to bring that would stay with him over the next couple decades to this direct continuation.
I mean, I definitely put those things in that I thought would show that timidity and that, any opportunity to silently example the source of both his torture and his relief. Do you follow what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I have to do it silently. So I can only do it with certain types of movements, certain types of turns, tilts of the head, whatnot. And but those were that backstory and that groundwork that I did on the original is what saved me. And because at a certain point, skipping forward now, a certain point in the process, they came to me and they said, you got to figure out how to make this guy sympathetic. And that came, after we had already shot some stuff. So, I mean, it was a bit of pressure that I wasn't necessarily ready for. But I think because of my backstory and my groundwork was so deep, and so I understood at least my viewpoint so that I could have someplace to be sympathetic from, I found it easier to make that jump, when they added this hurdle later on that I was given.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And it's one of those things like, and I'm sure you've seen, stepping into franchises like this, people have their version of what they think the character is or what the film should be. And, when I watched the 2022 version, for me, I was worried about the themes carrying over. And like I said, those things that are in the subtext of the original film, and like I said, him being sympathetic, I think some horror fans went like, why would they do that? Or why would they? And it's like, that's there from the beginning. There's also these themes of family that's so present. And the most interesting shift, I guess, tonally from that film to this is the first one really comments on the paternal relationship. This one really comments on the maternal relationship because you've got a female caretaker for him. Did that influence your take on Leatherface's approach to this story, or was it something that you thought about in terms of, okay, he's been living with this woman who seems a lot less toxic, for lack of a better word, than his prior family?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely made a lot of choices based on that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't say that I made opposite or negative choices based on the fatherly influence or the, like you're saying, paternal influence of the first one. But there were definite assumptions made, and not like assumptions isn't the right word. I definitely, decided on something that had occurred in the original, and to be honest with you, the way I read a script and the way I prepare something, the difference had to be in my portrayal in this story. So what is different about that and this?
Yeah.
And at least for me to know that. And those are the things that give the character depth and add to the. I mean, in my opinion, it does add even to the mystique about it. If you can understand a little more about some type of character like this, but not the whole book of information, like that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I kind of got sidetracked here. I don't know if I answered your question or not. But.
No, that does. I was just curious, and I think what you just said kind of points to the difference of imitating versus, like you said, playing Gunner, playing this character, where you're making decisions that evolve it a little bit while also being true to what it was. It's not just, hey, I'm going to transport what I saw here into this and do the exact same thing. Because obviously Leatherface is older. He's experienced different things, the events of the first film. Coming into this, I know we've talked about the sympathetic side. There's also a lot of carnage and mayhem, which is a requirement in these. And we talked about physicality, like the physicality of, 1990s Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a far throw from the physicality of this film. What was that like? Were you spending as much time with stunt teams prepping as you were prepping like the actual performance? Like how heavy duty was that lift for you?
I mean, it was an extensive stunt process. Each of them were what they call pre-vised, pre-visualized, and we worked on those routines and replicated them, and then when it got closer to the shooting time of each of them, went through them again and worked them up until they were ready for camera, and then we did them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a process I'm familiar with, and I didn't have any problem with it.
Yeah. Because I was watching again and like see the scene in the police van, which it caught me off guard because I forgot about this moment where you like break his hand and then shove his arm into his throat, which is awesome. But I was watching thinking too, like, was a lot of that stuff practical? Because it looked practical.
It was all practical.
Was there anything that was, because even the shot of you falling in the water at the end, my brain instantly went to, that would be a pain in the ass to reset because the water's all turned red. Was it difficult having more than one go at stuff? Did you have a lot of scenes where it was like, if we don't get this scene like this right now, like this is our one shot at this moment?
I mean, I don't have any problem doing stuff again. I love doing stuff again. It's always an opportunity to do it better. And, specifically speaking about the van, like that, the interesting thing about that fight is that it takes place in a van. You know what I mean? So it's very tight, and then you put, a relatively large camera guy in there, and then there's even less room. So it was very, there wasn't a lot of free form, just like let's shoot it handheld and hope we get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was very, very tight and very structured shooting, and but again, I love that.
Yeah.
I dig that.
Yeah.
If you tell me I can't move from here to here, I'm gonna make my performance within that framework.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's going to be as dynamic and visually stunning as I can make it.
Yeah. I heard you talk about on another interview, like the bus sequence, which is like the kind of that's your trailer moment. Like this is our big set piece. And you talk about like they built the roof of it. They could take it off. Like they gave you a lot of like, they designed that sequence in a very elaborate way. And then you've got these spots where it's close quarters, you're in the van and it's, really tight. We can't do all this because like we've got to get these moments. Was there anything in the movie that someone watching would go, hey, that scene was really simple to shoot, that was like deceptively really hard? And was there anything that looks like it's really complicated that was like, oh, that was really easy, that was like one or two takes?
The interesting thing is at the bus is that, we had to shoot a lot of it twice because you have to shoot it. Like at the beginning when I'm coming in, before I turn on the saw, it's very narrow up those stairs and all that. And then we shoot the tail end of it again in the studio set when the saw gets started and all that. Um, but I mean, the thing that turns me on about making movies is the filmmaking aspect. So any of those that had multiple moving parts and you know, very complicated moves, like, are the ones that I love, like the chick going out the window, or me killing Sally Hardesty and throwing her lifeless body across the street onto the trash pile. Like, those are the things that I get into, and I love doing them, and they really speak to me, you know. Or, you know, the guy wearing a fake arm that gets broken off and stabbed into his throat, you know. And oh, I wanted to say this about what you said a moment ago. Everything is practical in this show. Everything is practical. There was I mean, you might have, you know, they might have had some quote unquote computer graphics for like fill-ins or backgrounds or something like that, but the effects and the stunts themselves were all practical.
That's how it
It's,
looked.
you know,
I was watching and I was, you know, I hadn't watched it probably in a year and a half or so, and was revisiting it, and I was blown away because I was like, oh, there's really nothing in here that looks like it's visual or digital. Like, it all feels very grounded and real. But also when you're spraying blood everywhere, you know, you're like, that's a huge reset for all these sequences, you
oh,
know.
dude, like when I had her up on the blade of the saw like that, you know, there were guys dumping, you know, I don't know, more than 5 gallons of blood on me at one time. I mean, it was so much that I went home and my contacts were stained
Oh, wow.
from the amount of blood that went into my face and eyes during that shot. I mean, I just have to say about this, it's Fede Alvarez. I mean, he's a genius. Don't Breathe made its money back in about 48 hours and went on to make $80 million in the theaters in the following week. So that kind of like set the bar for Fede, and I don't believe he's raised it every time, whether it's Evil Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or Alien. So I mean, he's straight up genius, and to me, he's you know, he's at the top of the heap
Yeah, yeah,
for
for
sure.
sure. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of his, and he's one of the people that, like, you know, I'm usually the type where, like, I look for the filmmaker's name in the trailer beyond even the actors. So, like, it's just how I've
Yeah.
always been. And whenever I see his name pop up, like, I was in the theater for Maxine recently, and the trailer for Alien came on, and it was like, from Fede Alvarez, and I was like, I will be there. I don't even care what the movie is. Let's make it
Yeah,
happen. Um,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, I got to ask you this. I know we're getting near the end. I told my wife I was going to be interviewing you, and she kind of shuddered because she stopped going on Netflix for a while. This is true. In When the movie came out, every time she go on Netflix, she'd be like, why is this on the screen every time I open Netflix? And it's you in the like sunflower field, just looking creepy as hell. And she'd be like, I'm not even
Yeah.
going to go on Netflix. I want to wait till this movie is kind of like back in the catalog. For you, if you know you're the one in the movie, like, is there any piece of you that, like, when you sit down and watch it, do you lose yourself watching yourself? Like, I always wonder, like, when you're watching a scary movie and you know how the sausage is made, which is a really gross analogy for these films, like, does it take you out of it to be like, oh, that's me? Or are you just watching it from like how are
No,
you
because I
stepping
mean,
into it?
you know, I'm a jaded audience member. I watch things from a filmmaking standpoint. I'm always, you know, whether I'm in the movie or not, I'm either wondering or thinking about how it was done and if it could be done better, or, you know, it's not so much critical like that, but I really I don't get involved in the story. But that being said, as when I'm in the movie, I don't get involved in the story because I know I've done that work and put it there already. So, um, you know, I can't. I mean, it's a to me. it's not ideal. Like I wish I could get involved in the story and become like just a regular audience member in more movies and whatnot, but I'm just the I'm just I guess I'm a hypercritical audience member or whatever you want to call it. I'm just always trying to figure out what was done and how it was done. Like when I saw this is not really relevant, but I saw that movie Ambulance with Colin Farrell, I think, was it? Oh no,
Jake Gyllenhaal, yeah.
Jake Gyllenhaal. Like I was amazed at all the drone work in that movie. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, how did they do those things where the car is obviously, I mean, it's probably not full speed, but it certainly isn't like 20 miles an hour either. Like, how do they get these sweeping drifts with the drone exactly where it's supposed to be? I mean, I was like, that kind of stuff is what I'm thinking about when I'm watching a movie.
Right. Yeah. What's even crazier with that specifically, if you don't follow him on Instagram, you should. Fred North is a helicopter pilot, and he shot. So they had Michael Bay hired a bunch of drone pilots for the film, but he's worked a lot with Fred North, and Fred North just did like the new Beverly Hills Cop and like landed a helicopter in front of City Hall in LA. Like he's insane. And he's somebody I want to interview, and I'm always like, I've got to interview him before one of these stunts goes wrong. Like, you watch his stuff. But anyway, his behind the scenes for Ambulance, like flying under all these overpass and stuff, is absolutely crazy. So definitely check that out if you're a fan.
I will for sure.
But yeah, well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I could talk about Run Cops for about an hour and a half. So thanks for spanning so much of this. I'll ask you this as my last question.
Well, no, I was just going to say real quickly, the way that came about, Wrong Cops, is I tagged along. They did not invite me to Sundance with Wrong. And I just want to say this really quickly. In a, Sundance hot tub at 4 a.m, these Parisians are like, Mark, we have this other little thing we want you to do. So I did 2 days on Wrong. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking maybe I'll get a week out of it. It'll be great. It'll be awesome. And then, a couple of days later, because we shot that quick, like after Sundance that year, like we got back to LA, and I think the next weekend we were shooting the short, but I'm in every scene, every second of that film. And I was like, blown away. This is what I mean when I say, I get crazy Hollywood lucky throughout my career, and I don't know what it is. But anyway, what were you going to say?
Well, now I'm thinking we need a Texas Chainsaw sequel with Duke as the sheriff in the town, facing off against Leatherface. I think would be a good confrontation.
That would be amazing.
Or Leatherface versus the cartel, and get your LOWLIFE. There's lots of options here.
There you go.
I was going to ask you. You've had a very varied career, like I said, comedy, horror, like indie, like all these different routes. What's the one role that like you are most proud of out of the span of all of those things? Like, what's the one that stands out to you as like, this is the one that I point to as like, this is me. I'm proud of what I did here. Like, I wish everyone saw this.
Certainly the most both technically challenging and physically demanding is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I'm super proud of it. I'll also tell you that, it ran like the shooting of that, we shot for 2.5 months. It ran the gamut from, oh my God, this is going to be amazing, to holy shit, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this, to it's going south, what the fuck do we do, to, it ran all of those emotions during the shooting of it. And then to come out of it, and remember that, it went to sale in 21. Nobody was going to the theaters in the fall of 21. So the sale to Netflix was the best deal that they could make at the time. And then to have it run for almost 2 weeks in the top 10 on Netflix worldwide, and then now I do conventions and people come up to me and they're like, oh my God, it's not about stroking me. What it is it's a plan well executed. because they like see the backstory and see the way that I made him sympathetic. It speaks to them, and they come to my table now and they're like, "Oh my God, you're the best guy since Gunner," or "I saw what you did, you made me cry," or whatever it is. They respond to the movie, and that is what I'm most proud of, because, like I said a second ago, like I wasn't sure it was going to happen, you know, and so I'm most proud of Texas Chainsaw Massacre because it's the most challenging thing I've ever been asked to do, artistically or anything, and it ended up to be a job well executed. Now I did, it's not all up to me. I had the ear of the producers and Fahey's eye in L.A. and blah 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 blah. So it wasn't just me, but I'm telling you for myself that I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to do it, and then it all came together, and now people love it. So I'm like, woo!
Perfect.
You know?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm most proud of that.
Yeah, and there's a million reasons it shouldn't have happened. Like pandemic hitting, right after you land the job.
And that's a whole story. Yeah,
Like,
that's a whole story in and of itself.
Right.
I don't know, how would you have more time?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'll listen to stories all day long. But
So there was only us. There was only us, Dune, and Jurassic Park, whatever, shooting in the whole world. In the whole world, there's only 3 major productions shooting. And, I took 75 of those first-gen nasal tests where they were like jamming it all up into your sinus. 75 of those in 90 days.
Jeez.
And the production never tested positive. And that was it was August of 2020.
The height.
So that was at the height of everything. And we never tested positive. We never shut down. It was a whole, and like you said, I found out I got my job on like a Wednesday, and on Saturday they shut down the world.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, you got to be fucking
Did you
kidding
figure
me.
it was just done? Like, oh, they're going to just cancel this? Or like...
I mean, I didn't know, because at a certain point they were not responding to us.
Oh.
Like,
sure.
I would say to my agent, can you reach out again? And she's like, I just talked to him last week. And then eventually they came back and said, yes, we're still going. Mark's the guy. We don't know when. So just sit tight. And at that point, I was like, okay, I can relax a little.
Yeah.
But prior to that, it was easily a month or two of not knowing nothing.
Jeez, yeah. Like, let me land the biggest role of my career and then go silent, and then, and then, like you said, trying to distribute it and then actually making it. I was in a docuseries like in 2021, and I had to do like 3 nasal swabs, and I felt like a martyr. So now I feel like nothing compared to that experience.
Every other day for 90 days.
Was it a setup? Because I know like Ty West with X, like they were in a spot and they just kind of locked off and just stayed in one spot with everybody. Did you guys kind of do the same thing where you get to your set location and everyone just kind of camps out there and nobody's going in or out for that period of time? Or like,
yeah, but then you add into that the zones. So we were not mixing zones.
Gotcha.
So zone A people stayed with zone A people. Zone B, and zone C is...
You're not talking to the lighting guy in between takes, basically. You're like...
No, but this movie was, he's an exec, but he was on this movie. Is a guy named Herb Gaines. If you've never heard of Herb Gaines, you should look him up and look at his resume. But, I would be like, bored in my green room, and I would take a walk, and he'd be like, Mark, you're not supposed to be here. Get back in your, all right, Herb, So in fact, and to say it another way, my entire process that I formulate a character from was taken away from me because I couldn't stand in the back and watch the other setups and watch the other takes. And, so then where does that leave me? That leaves me completely and wholly dependent, and my only source of info is what the producer and director say to me in between takes. And that's not a level of trust I'm used to. Nothing
Sure.
wrong with them. It's not about them lying. It's nothing negative towards them. It's just like, I want to see it with my own eyes, make my own decisions about what I think the character needs to do or say or how it's done, and then come in and be adjusted. And if you take that away from me, then it's like kind of like doing it half blind. You
Sure.
know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it was, I mean, it just adds to the difficulty and the challenge and the pride in that it's well received now.
Right. I just looked up Herb Gaines, and he basically just produced every movie that's ever been made. So,
Oh, dude, yeah.
yeah,
Amazing person.
yeah. No, that's super. That's super cool. It's like I said, I'm like you. I'm fascinated by the filmmaking process. So, like, whenever there's a movie that has no right to even make it off the ground, or like there's a billion things that could go wrong, I'm always like,
Yeah.
it makes it more interesting because you're watching something that
Yeah.
is executed well. Yeah,
I mean, even an easy shoot, is you could refer to as making, going to war. You know what I
right,
mean?
right.
Just the art of filmmaking is that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay, I'll ask one. I'm gonna ask one more question because
It's all
you
right.
mentioned war. Um, I know you said there was like you ran the gamut from like this is amazing to I don't know if I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
What was like the worst moment on set where you're like, what did I sign up for? Like this is brutal.
It's not. It's the worst, but it's not the worst in the sense of most distasteful or
Mhm.
whatever. It's the worst because I didn't know how to do it. Is when they came and said you have to make the character sympathetic.
Mm.
Like, I mean, I had prepped up that stuff, right? So
Yeah.
I had a certain viewpoint about the character and about his youth with the other family, and I felt like I was going to put it in there in subtle, small ways whenever I could, but I didn't know if I was going to get the opportunity to
Mhm.
do that, or if uh, it would be accepted
Mhm.
by the powers that be. Remember that, people were watching dailies here in LA. So it's a bit of like, you know, the NASA is sending messages to the crew on Mars
So-
and it doesn't get there till tomorrow,
Right. And
So
they're thinking
there's
about this
always,
is our franchise and this is this and we need to make sure we're not messing with this and yeah.
yeah, but so what that was the worst thing to have happen. Is like I didn't know, I had zero confidence that I was going to be able to make that adjustment, and that is not a place where I like to
Yeah.
create from. Like I mean, uh, my training both in acting and history and filmmaking, like I would like to have an answer.
Yeah.
I would like to relatively quickly. I would like to have an answer. I mean, you wouldn't know this, but there's other aspects of my life. I mean, I can't elaborate more than that really, but that are called take two, right? Because I like to pride myself like on take two we're going to be moving on,
Yeah. Right.
and it's not to quickie or rush things, but it's because I take pride in the fact that I know how to solve things and I know how to make adjustments, and we're going to do it again. You're going to see it, you're going to like it, and we're not going to need to do any more.
Yeah.
So that means that we can spend more time on things that are going to be problems in 5 minutes, or move on to whatever else is. And so when I don't have that ability, it's not an easy place for me to be.
Right. Well, like I said, I mean, I'm impressed with the final result. I've loved so much of your work throughout your entire career. Like I said, I mean, for anybody listening, watch Wrong Cops. Like it's such a great
It's
film.
on Tubi.
Yeah, it's
You can see it on Tubi.
yeah, Low Life is out there. I think AMC Plus is where I just
Mm-hmm.
revisited it again. But yeah,
It's also on Amazon.
oh, it is. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
But no, thank you again so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And And honestly, I hope it pushes people to check out a lot of your other work and revisit Texas Chainsaw, because again, watching it again after a year or two, having seen it last time, it holds up, and it's a really, really great sequel.
It's still on the front page of Netflix horror.
Yeah.
Almost 3 years later.
To my wife's
I don't know if Sorry.
But awesome. Well, thanks so
anyway,
much, Mark.
thank you, Eric. I appreciate you. Thank you very much.